Welcome. I'm Mara Gladstone, Director of Programs and Interpretation at Desert X. I'm speaking to you today from Serrano land. Desert X takes place on Cahuilla land, and I acknowledge the Cahuilla people as the original stewards of the land. We pay our respect to the indigenous people, past, present, and emerging, who have been here since time immemorial. Today's virtual gathering follows Fugitive Bodies, a program we launched on the Desert X website last week, and which is now available for viewing. The conversation between artist Felipe Baeza, co-curator Cesar Garcia Alvarez, and scholar Luisa Heredia explored the notion of the fugitive body as a lived condition, a state of constant being here, there, and not there, a response to governmental and community policy and policing, and the fugitive body as a site of possibility. Today's program, Taking Action, builds upon that conversation by featuring the work of activists and artists who advocate for and navigate the harsh realities of immigrant experience in different ways. They create spaces of sanctuary, offer opportunities for healing, and are powerful voices in immigration reform. If you have questions, please submit them on the Q&A function at the bottom of your screen. I hope you've also had the opportunity to view the short film, The Undocumented Lawyer, featuring Lizbeth Mateo, one of our panelists today. If not, the film is streaming on our Desert X website through Thursday, March 25th, and I thank Optimist Productions for its partnership. All of these public programs amplify the ideas of several artist projects in the Desert X 2021 exhibition, including Felipe Baeza's mural, Finding Home in My Own Flesh, which will be on view in early April, as well as Eduardo Sarabia's installation, The Passenger. We invite you to visit these installations, virtually or in person, and consider some of the perspectives offered here. I'm delighted now to turn the program over to Luisa Heredia, the Joanne Woodward Chair of Public Policy at Sarah Lawrence College.
Hi and welcome. Thank you for joining us for today's virtual gathering, Taking Action. As Mara said, I'm Luisa Heredia, a professor at Sarah Lawrence College, and I'm in conversation today with Lizbeth Mateo, attorney and organizer, also featured in the film The Undocumented Lawyer, Javier Hernandez, director of the Inland Coalition for Immigrant Justice, and Ubaldo Boido, artist and founder of The House, an LGBTQIA+ migrant home here in the Coachella Valley. Let me offer a couple of comments to frame today's virtual gathering. First, just a couple of notes on policy. So one, policy that impacts the livelihoods of migrants is multiscalar, which means that it is devised and carried out at the local, state, and federal levels. Now, what this also means is that laws and policies can be challenged, implemented, and shaped at these multiple levels as well, and in ways that have real impacts on the livelihoods of migrants. Two, to understand policy, one must also take a longer view. Policies that target and police migrants or that provide openings and access have a long history in the US that cross administrations headed by both Republicans and Democrats alike. Of course, there are differences in how punitive administrations have been and in how receptive they are to organizers, activists, and advocates. These 2 points help to frame the policy context within which Lizbeth, Javier, and Ubaldo are organizing and working. Collectively, they are all organizing around immigration, although they are doing so across a broad range of arenas. Seen together, they are shaping and reshaping policies and programs at these multiple scales, providing direct services to affected individuals, families, and communities. And importantly, they are also helping to center the voices and actions of migrants in our politics around immigration. So let's begin. By way of introduction, can you each tell us a bit about yourselves, your work now, and how you came to that work? We can start with Lizbeth.
Sure. Well, first of all, thank you so much for inviting me. I'm very excited to be here and to see some familiar faces. Hi, Javier. So my name is Lizbeth Mateo. I was born and raised in Oaxaca, Mexico, to an indigenous family. And when I was 14, my family and I migrated to the US. my parents did ask my opinion, actually, which I think a lot of parents, don't get to do that. And my parents had that conversation with me, and I was very excited about actually moving to California, because in my mind, this was, the land of opportunities. I was going to be able to learn English in 2 years and then go back to Oaxaca and become an attorney there. 2 years have now been 22 years, more than 22 years. And I think I came into this work to some extent at a necessity. I was, very competitive child as a kid. I was very studious. I wanted to go to college. I always dreamt of being an attorney. And I remember realizing that my undocumented status was going to be an issue. I knew I was undocumented, but I didn't realize how difficult it was going to make my life until I think my senior year in high school. So I started asking questions very naively, and then came across other undocumented students and realized, okay, if something is going to change, first of all, I'm not the only one. Second, if something's going to change, we're going to have to change it, because people are not going to just hand us anything. We're really going to have to work for it. And so I became an organizer, but always in the back of my mind was that dream of being an attorney. I just didn't realize I was going to be an attorney here. I think it took me a while to finally say, okay, fine, I'm going to go to law school. Finally, I'm going to put aside being an organizer, which was not easy because I was so attached to the work. And I felt like it was such a big part of me that I didn't know how to detach from all of that. But luckily, I found people that were very supportive in my law school as well, Santa Clara Law, and I was able to, graduate and then pass the bar on my first stride and became an attorney without having the ability to legally work, without having, any kind of protection against deportation. But then again, friends and family helped me open my own practice, and now I represent people like myself, people who are undocumented, and I can do things for them that sometimes I can't do for myself. So it's such a privilege and contradiction being who I am, but it's an honor, it's a privilege, and it's not something that I take lightly.
Javier?
So yeah, again, to echo Lizbeth, thank you all for inviting me to this today. And nice to see all of you all, and also Lizbeth. It's been a while since we've been in a panel together, or even been in a space together. So nice to see you too. Javier Hernandez, the Executive Director of the Inland Coalition for Immigrant Justice. We are an immigrant rights coalition in the Inland Empire, so both San Bernardino and Riverside County. We work with over 50 organizations, local, state, and national organizations, to improve the lives of immigrants that live, work, in the Inland Empire. And so some of that work includes policy advocacy, deportation defense work. We in the Inland Empire, we have the largest detention center in the West Coast, and actually the largest detention in the United States. As soon as COVID restrictions are lifted on how many folks can be detained there, it would be the largest detention center in the United States, right here in California, right? And so we are, that's one of our, biggest campaigns that we have as a coalition, right? Finding ways to shut down that detention center and to find ways to actually end detention overall, because we know that detention is something that's very new. It's not, detention is, it's about mass detention as we know it for immigrants. It's only about 25, 26 years old, right? And it came to be this way under the Bill Clinton administration, right? This is something very new. And so this is, that's one of our, main campaigns, right? To ensure that we are able to shut down this place and have a more humane approach, right, to immigration and how we treat immigrants that are coming into the United States. And so how I started in this work, in 2009, graduating high school earlier, a few years before, and not really knowing what I could do, right? Could I go to college or not? And then finding an amazing group of youth and students, right, in my local community college that were organizing around immigrant rights, specifically around the rights of youth, right, and students. That's how I got into this work, something very personal, because it is our life, it is my life. Part of why I also got into this in 2006, my father was deported, and knowing, what I know now, it's like we could have probably stopped his deportation, but unfortunately we didn't know, what we know now, right? I was still in high school at the time. And so I also wanted to make sure that that this story and my story was something that if we could stop deportations of families, of parents, of youth, that we could get involved, right? And we could do something about it. And so that's why I got involved. Started very local at a community college, then went from community college to actually organizing with the Inland Empire Immigrant Youth Collective, which is also a youth organization for immigrant youth, led by immigrants, for immigrants, and for immigrant youth specifically in the Inland Empire back in 2010. Yeah, so that's a little bit about me and the work that I do now.
Great, thanks. Ubaldo?
Hi, everybody. Thank you so much for having me. My name is Ubaldo, and I work with my partner to create the house. We created the house as a project of Rainbow Beginnings, which is an LGBTQ immigrant assistant program or nonprofit that we created. Most of our work is focused on LGBTQ community that's suffering persecution from around the world. And our work is specifically focused on them accessing service and sponsorship and housing and things that are needed when you don't have family that can offer you those things. So I'm excited to be here because I'm a firstborn American, but my parents are from Sonora, Mexico, and they are immigrants as well, and so are my grandparents, et cetera, et cetera. So I grew up with a lot of privilege here, and I'm excited to be at a panel where I get to share what I do, because I focus mostly on LGBTQ suffering around the world, and that my queerness has brought me to that point. And that's where my partner and I got involved, when it was like, well, immigration is definitely a scary process to the United States, and when you have nobody and nothing, it's even harder. And as we see immigrant communities supporting each other, which I think is amazing, a lot of the LGBTQ folk don't get access to that. So that's why we created Rainbow Beginnings. We got involved just by, reaching out and asking, like, hey, what are people doing for LGBTQ? Like, how are transgender people being treated in Tijuana while they wait to cross the border? And through that, we started meeting organizations that are doing a lot of great work, like Haitian Bridge Alliance and Al Otro Lado and things like that. And sort of recognizing the need for support. From there, we housed one asylum seeker on our couch in our 1-bedroom apartment. And they lived with us for 6 months. And then, 2 more came along. And then finally we were like, let's get a house, a space. So right now there are 5 gentlemen, gay, from Ghana, Cuba, from Russia, and various other places. Mexico, sorry, the other one's from Mexico. And yeah, we support them. So, and a lot of the services we offer are legal referrals, legal support, detention support, housing, food, medical support, mental health referrals, things like that. So, I mean, we pretty much do everything that we can to support these people through their journey, these guys. So, thank you.
Yeah, no, thank you all. And thank you all for being here. So I want to kind of go through these different kind of policy areas, right, in turn. And I want to start with kind of anti-detention and anti-deportation work. And Lizbeth, I'm hoping you can start us off here, taking us back kind of a bit, right, to what we see actually at the beginning of the film, kind of some of your work with the Dream 9 against kind of deportation, and just kind of what that direct action activism was like, and what you all were doing.
Yeah, sure. I mean, it was a very interesting time, and it actually started way before the Dream 9. I think the Dream 9 was sort of the culmination of all of it for me, because right after that, like a week after I came back from Mexico, I went to law school, and I, started studying and just trying to become an attorney. But I think the reason we started all the work and the way that it started was around 2000. 2009, realizing that there were undocumented young people that were being deported from this country, right? And we kind of knew, but we were not really connected as undocumented youth. We were connected maybe in California, and there were pockets of undocumented youth that were connected with each other across their states. Some of them in New York, some of them in Arizona, others here in California, but we were not as a network, as a national network connected. So in 2008, we started sort of talking to each other and trying to learn from each other and figure out if we can work together. And then we go to this mock graduation done in Washington, D.C. around the DREAM Act, to push for the DREAM Act. And there's this, young guy from Florida, valedictorian, star athlete of a school, very popular kid who's about to be deported. And we're like, oh, this is not, we connected with him because we kind of saw parts of ourselves, parts of our story reflected in him. And we started organizing around that case and realized that there were organizations, national organizations that were willing to support when it was convenient for them, though. And there were congressional offices that were willing to get involved, and that we can generate calls and we can generate petitions. And so we took what we learned from that case and we started replicating that and kind of testing different things, talking to elected officials, doing rallies, generating calls, generating petitions. DREAM activists sort of took on that role of being the social media / a main website and listserv that essentially created all these petitions and started pushing for anti-deportation work. And I was doing more of the advocacy and sort of organizing on the ground, but we started connecting with families in other states and basically teaching the families, teaching the communities that were not organizers, that were maybe not young people, how to advocate for their own families. And so eventually we moved from only advocating for dreamers and for the sort of sympathetic cases to advocating for people who were detained, people who were who had criminal records, people who were not dreamers, who were parents who had been in this country for a long time, who maybe didn't have the sort of clean-cut case. And we were very successful in doing a lot of that work. There was a point where dreamers were, through Dream activists and the National Immigrant Youth Alliance, were infiltrating detention centers to try to get stories out of those, in those places and help free people who have been detained for a long time. And then the Dream Night was basically, this crazy thing that we did because we thought, okay, we were able to keep people who are here. Sometimes we're able to keep them with their families. We're able to get them out of detention. We're able to get them out of planes. We're able to, stop their deportations very last minute using all the tactics that we learned, where attorneys have not been able to stop the deportations because there's only so much we can do as attorneys, right? But what do we do with all these people that have been deported? What do we do with people who have been deported under the Obama administration when there's, we have a president and we have Democrats who are talking about immigration reform and family reunification without addressing what family reunification means for people who have been deported. I also had, an uncle who was removed during the Obama administration. I had cousins that were detained and that we had to sort of organize to get them out because I had the skills. But I remember how much it impacted me knowing that I couldn't do anything for my uncle, and that, it made me feel like I could lose my parents the same way as well. So it really scared me. And I think it made me feel like I had to do even more. And so that's how we came out with this idea of Dream 9. If we can't stop the deportations here, then let's bring back the people that have already been deported. We wanted to do it in a mass scale. Obviously that takes so much work and so much energy. And we were funding our own work. We were not getting any funding from anyone. So it was, a lot of it was us working at our low income jobs or, minimum wage jobs, and then using all of that money to then organize. But yeah, that's the work.
Yeah, I mean, I want to highlight for folks, Lizbeth, you've gone through like a whole series of campaigns, right? And I think sometimes people are not kind of understanding the significance, right? And not just for like the work in terms of moving, for example, beyond dreamers as cases where you're doing anti-deportation work, but kind of extending that, right, to all kinds of folks, right? And really moving into the space of really deportation for no one, right? Like this should not be the outcome or the thing that we think is okay for a selective set of people. But really, so I want to take this back to highlight for folks, right, who have not kind of encountered this activism, right? This was really kind of transgressive, right? I mean, you all were, you know, this idea of putting your bodies on the line, right? We have this history of civil disobedience kind of in the US, which you all are a part of at this point, yeah? But there's a way in which your civil disobedience at every step of the way, right, subjected you to detention and deportation. And I think that's really one of the big kind of differences, right, that we're seeing, or one of the things that kind of makes this activism so something that we all need to know much more about. And then
absolutely.
And then with the Dream 9, right, I believe you were one of the people who actually crossed into Mexico. And so really this idea of putting your body on the line, right, for this kind of cause to ensure that not just the people who are here get to stay, but again, as you were saying, folks kind of who have already been deported are a part of our community, right? And that we kind of also need to work to bring them back. So I want to kind of highlight that significance.
Yeah, and if I can add just one little thing, which I think is important. And the reason we did, you know, what you mentioned, putting our bodies on the line, is because we realize our privilege. As young people, as you know, growing up in high school and college, we were very scared. We were very, I mean, we were naive, and we were also very scared and hadn't realized how much power we have in our own stories and by organizing together. And I think that at some point we realized, okay, we can stop deportations of dreamers. That means we can, to some extent, be safe from deportation, and we're not untouchable, because I don't think that that's true. But I'm going to be very honest. I think at some point we felt that way, right? And so we started pushing more and more. It's like having a teenager. I always feel like I was a teenager for a long time, because that's what we're doing. We're kind of poking and trying to figure out how far can we go while maintaining ourselves safe, our families, and then helping other people. So it was using that privilege that we had. That's why with the Dream 9, we were wearing caps and gowns, because the imagery, you know, how are you going to detain and deport a bunch of students, even though like I wasn't a student at that time, but we use that imagery, we use that sort of idea of innocence about dreamers to then do something that was completely to some extent radical in not what is expected of us.
Yeah, unbelievably radical. I'm not kind of right, unbelievably radical. So Javier, I want to kind of bring you in, because you started talking to us a bit about the work that you all are doing, right, around going after kind of detention centers and that work. So I'm wondering if you kind of want to add in terms of the kind of work that you all are doing against kind of detention and deportation as well.
Yeah, so I think for us, especially I think for me, this starts in 2011, I would say, as part of the Inland Empire Immigrant Youth Coalition at the time, or Immigrant Youth Collective. There was a story that students at San Bernardino Valley College in San Bernardino, the school police was actually, they either had the 287G or a Secure Communities contract with local ICE department. So this is a community college and university police department. They police San Bernardino Community College, Cal State San Bernardino, and I think Victor Valley College, I think it is. And a school police department should never have a contract with ICE ever. And so what we were seeing was stories of youth and students that would come into contact with school police and would end up in deportation proceedings, right? And one of those stories was the 17-year-old kid who had gone to us for information about college, was turned away, came in contact with the police, school police, and then ended up in deportation proceedings. And that was the first time I think that I would say that we started really challenging, the criminalization of immigrants and policing of immigrants. And, at that time we had a very public action with, I believe it was 7 youth that got arrested. Lizbeth was one of the organizers. They came in to help us. We were doing this locally, but Lizbeth, along with other folks, came in to support us in this action. And I would say that is where this, where our work around policing of immigrants started here in the Inland Empire, right? So really challenging 287G secure communities. And also it was the administration, right? The Obama administration. These are programs under his administration. And so really just changing the narrative of like, Obama has done so much for our communities to Obama has, really been building up this deportation machine under 287G in secure communities. And actually, in 2011, deportations, we have the highest number of deportations under any precedent, right? And that was the beginning of, I think, of really starting to challenge those, that message, right? Of like, this president has his hands tied. He can't do anything he could stop, and dismantle the deportation machine that he has built and continues to he continued to just build this machine. And so I think that's where the local work really started challenging that, but it was also part of the broader conversation, right? As Lizbeth said, there was a broader network of undocumented youth throughout the country, and we were having these conversations on how we then bring these conversations to our communities. So I think that was, one way to talk about it. But as, the Inland Empire and Coachella Valley and, San Bernardino, all these regions, we are considered a border region. What that means is that we not only do we have ICE presence, we also have Border Patrol presence. And as you all may be very aware, we really, Border Patrol, especially the last 4 years, was very present in our communities, and they were very present in our communities, racial profiling. There's Temecula, there's a Border Patrol station in Temecula, and one of the things that, in about 2019, sorry, in 2019, there was families that were reaching out to us saying, my family member was pulled over in the morning by ICE, but we can't find them anywhere. And so what we found was actually it wasn't ICE that was picking them up, it was Border Patrol. And Border Patrol was overwhelmed because they were going around picking up people everywhere. And then it was harder for them to process folks. So you would actually have people that were not in any system for about a month and a half, because ICE has a system, but Border Patrol doesn't, a locator system, sorry, right? And Border Patrol doesn't. So families would come to us and say, my family member is missing. And so when we figured out that it was Border Patrol, we shed light on that, right? And we also realized that Border Patrol in their office in Temecula, which is supposed to accommodate no more than like 20 people, had about 70 people in there. People were not getting showers, they were not getting fed appropriately, they were not given clean clothing. And so we broke that story, right? It's like, if you're overwhelmed, why do you still keep driving around in our communities looking for people? That's something that they shouldn't be doing, period, right? And so that's, we were able to get some congressional oversight, folks were released, we were able to help those families out. And some of them ended up in Adelanto, at the detention center in Adelanto. And so again, same process, right? We look at the stories, we try to find legal support. Many people that go through the immigration system, and I think Lizbeth can talk more about this, but many of those folks don't have legal, well, number one, you're not given an attorney, right? It's not the law to give an attorney for immigration court. And many of them do not have the funds to afford an immigration attorney. So many folks go blind, right, through this whole case, through their whole system blind. And so we have a network of attorneys where we try to find pro bono or low bono attorneys to represent folks, right, so that they can at least have a chance to fight their case, because if you don't have an attorney, it's very difficult to fight your case. And so, that's how we are able to support, folks when they contact us, right? And then I think one of the other things that, and we're seeing it now, right, in 2019, Border Patrol being so overwhelmed and still driving around picking up people, they started dropping off families, at bus stations. And we saw this in Coachella Valley. We saw this in San Diego. And it also happened in San Bernardino, right? Where families, 4 or 5 people were being dropped off at once. We actually Border Patrol was dropping off anywhere from like 20 to 30 people at any given time at these bus stops without any resources, just kind of like, good luck. And so we had to step in and to house folks, to give them medical care, to give them clothing, to, some of these folks have not even had a chance to shower in like 1 week or 2 weeks, because, there was no opportunity to shower at these, Border Patrol facilities. And so, we stepped in to do some of that work as well. But at the same time, really just highlighting the fact that, asylum seekers, like asking for asylum is legal, right? And this administration, the last administration was making it seem that it was illegal, that it was something that they didn't have a right to do. And so we had to challenge that as well, right? And really remind folks that no, asking for asylum is very legal. And people coming here and asking for this, they have every right to do that. And the administration also has a responsibility to then treat people with dignity and respect, right? And if they weren't going to do it, we say, we'll release people and we'll do it for you, right? And we had to step up and do that. And we welcome folks in a more humane way, in a way that they, that they were seen and understood. And we were able to provide, that critical support for them in a time where they're coming into a country and it's really scary. We were able to provide some sense of support and family, right, where they can be together. I know I went a little bit on a tangent, right? But yeah, I mean, I think it just to go back, yeah, the fight for, criminalization and policing of immigrants started in 2011, challenging 287G secure communities. And I think it just has, throughout time, and because I stayed in the Inland Empire throughout this time, there's been different ways that we have been able to do this. But the most important thing to highlight is the fact that as a border region, we have both ICE and Border Patrol enforcement here in our region. And these are two agencies that are rogue. There is no oversight. And what happens when you have two agencies, that are here to inflict pain to immigrant communities, then we see that pain here in the Riverside and San Bernardino County in higher numbers than we see it in other regions of the state or even other regions of the country.
Well, we welcome the tangent. We'll kind of move in that direction in a bit, but I do kind of want to highlight, so 287G and secure communities, for folks who don't know, right, enable collaboration between the federal government as well as local authorities to then kind of police and detain migrants, to police and hold migrants and then move them kind of into detention centers. Ubaldo?
Yeah, I just wanted to highlight something on that we actually, as a group, support, we have a volunteer group that supports Imperial Regional Detention Facility, which is in Calexico, which is one of the facilities that is never spoken about or highlighted. And one of the things that we want, that we try to do is to highlight and shine a lot of the atrocities that happen at this detention center. What we see are, people coming out with third-degree burns from detention. One of the guys that's with us now came out with third-degree burns on his leg. We see a lot of unsanitary conditions. We hear a lot about, property being stolen, people being quarantined and isolated for any reason that the guards feel is appropriate. And these are all run by private contracts that the government pays for. So there's kind of no reason for these facilities to treat anybody with human dignity. And what we're seeing the most is there's such a confusion about COVID right now. Recently, like today, one of our volunteers is down picking up somebody that has COVID in this facility. So these are hotbeds for COVID, right? When you have a group of people living together on top of each other in unsanitary conditions, yes, it's ripe for COVID. And this is Ronnie's.
Hello.
He's from Cuba, asylum seeker from Cuba. So, what we're seeing is a lot of confusion around that. So I think, some of the stuff that we advocate for is definitely just highlighting what ICE is doing and always saying I call for open borders. Like that is what I call for all the time. And that means to any congressional, to any assembly district member, to any senator that we speak to, we push for that. And that's what we're always advocating. So yeah.
Absolutely. So one of the things I want to do is actually to go off of the tangent, kind of that Javier moved us into, because I think this also is some of the work that you're doing, right? So the Coachella Valley also has a history of providing kind of housing and helping kind of those asylum seekers, right, that were instead of having them being dropped off at the bus stations kind of and whatnot, housing folks. And again, the same kind of work, Javier, that you're talking about. So we definitely kind of have that history kind of with asylum seekers. And in the Coachella Valley, I want to say it was mostly families, right? And actually, I also want to say primarily men who are coming with children. So we also have that history, but I want to turn it over to Ubaldo, because Ubaldo, I think the work that you all are doing, right, is kind of specific, right? You're really moving us into this much more kind of intersectional framework, right? To think through the ways in which kind of different points are really mapped onto each other to kind of exacerbate kind of precarity, violence, right, against folks kind of and whatnot. And so to think through, again, providing kind of those services and whatnot, and again, the work that you all are doing kind of at the house.
Yeah, thank you, Luisa. I think, speaking to what you're asking, it's such a case-by-case basis. Every individual comes with their own specific set of needs, and and of course we expect that. It's sort of like how you humanely approach anybody that you offer any kind of service. What we kind of see happening through ICE and CBP is this real criminalization, as Javier spoke of, and Lizbeth spoke of migrants. And what we kind of have to do is change the focus and speak to why it's humane to offer somebody healthcare or even mental health services. This is something that I've been really focused on lately, is mental health services. I'm working with an organization here to have pláticas where we're able to discuss in Latinx communities, what is mental health? How do we access that? How do we speak about it, and how do we speak up and ask for it? Today, one of the guys, also health services, one of the guys was like, I need to get tested. And I'm like, for what? And he didn't want to tell me. He did not want to tell me what it was. And and I had to if you want me to help you, I need to understand, because if I don't understand, I don't know what to ask for you. I hope that answers some of your question. But a lot of what we have to access free food. We have to access free phones. Sometimes we have to do whatever we can to help people gain access to living here.
Yeah, I think some of the work that was happening here also on the eastern end of the Coachella Valley was a number of folks that were kind of coming through. Their families, in order to be kind of reunited with their families, were in the South and on the East Coast, right? And so it was also trying to figure out how to get folks kind of all the way from here, right, back to the other side kind of the country. Yeah, which is some of the stuff. Yeah.
Yeah, we do that too. I work with Miles for Migrants, which is a really great organization that collects miles and helps get people airline tickets to be reunited with family and sponsors. So yeah.
And so I want to kind of also then move a little bit into the legal side, right? And Lizbeth, we'll kind of come back to you, because all of you have mentioned, right, the important role of providing legal services to kind of a number of folks, right? And Elizabeth, you can talk about that a bit more generally, but you can also talk about it in relation kind of to the work kind of on sanctuary and this idea of a single case that can then really move policy, right? Or at least really reshape, again, the livelihoods or the access that kind of undocumented folks have, or asylum seekers or anything like that.
Yeah. Well, so, I'm an attorney, I'm an immigration attorney, but I know my limitations as well. And I've known my limitations for a long time, because before becoming an attorney, I was an organizing, working on deportation cases, deportation campaigns, anti-deportation campaigns, with sometimes along, some attorneys that just had done everything they could possibly do. But the system is set up to make people fail their asylum interviews, their asylum cases, or just any case really. It's not set up to be fair to immigrants. And so I knew that going into this work. And so as an attorney, I very early on, I said, well, I'm gonna have to use some of my skills as an organizer, because I know that I'm not gonna be able to win every single case. I'm gonna, even the best attorneys, the more experienced attorneys lose cases. So I knew that, and I started integrating some of the organizing aspects or the organizing tactics that I learned over the years in some of my cases. And so with Edith, who's part of the documentary as well, her case, I was like the fifth attorney in the case. There had been several very experienced attorneys working on the case, and she had gone through the process that was not fair at all, but she went through a process of appealing the case. And so we knew that if we were going to win this case, it was going to be through organizing. And she was willing to do that. So in order for me to do the work that I do as an organizer and as an advocate / attorney, the client needs to be willing to do that. And so with the deed, we formed a partnership. And we had that conversation very early on. It's going to be a partnership. You're going to have to lead your campaign. You're going to be the organizer. I'm going to be the attorney. You tell me what you want to do, and I will tell you what are the pros and cons of that strategy, and help you come up with a different strategy if necessary. Figure out a way to make sure that you're safe and your family's safe. And so that's been the approach. And like I said in the documentary, for me, it was important to have one case that we could win, so then we can start replicating that in other cases. And luckily, we were able to do that with the deed, not during the Trump administration, unfortunately, but during this administration, very early on, we started pushing for a deed to be able to be quote unquote released from sanctuary. And she walked into the ICE office with no assurance that she was going to be able to walk out, but she was willing to take that risk and negotiate with ICE. And so those are the things that I was willing to do because my client was willing to take that risk as well. And so we both walked into this office, negotiate her terms of being able to now be free and go back to her family. And then from there, other people who are also in sanctuary started coming out. And so then we see more and more people finally become free again after years of living in confinement in churches. And it's the same, for me, it's the same strategy to some extent, maybe with some differences, obviously, that I'm going to be using for other cases, because I have clients, I'm working right now on cases where people have been detained for 2 years, for more than 2 years. And there's no reason why that should happen under this administration, under, the guidelines that have been made public and that to some extent are being quote unquote implemented, but we're seeing a lack of implementation or fair implementation across the country. So we're going to have to monitor how that works. And I think that this is where my work as an attorney, the privilege that I have of being an attorney and what the access that it gives me is very important. But then also thinking as an organizer, thinking beyond what the law says, because the law is not fair. And so, that's my approach to the work that I do.
Yeah, right on. This idea of kind of using the law, but also thinking beyond the law, right? It reminds me also of the early work that the early activist work that you all were doing, right? And the ways in which you kind of found that power, right, to kind of face down some of these systems. We have about 20 minutes left. I want to remind anyone, if you have questions, please kind of use the Q&A function, and you can kind of send those in. We have a ton to talk about, of course, right? No sobra, like we won't have time to kind of cover everything, of course. So we can also just kind of keep talking if we don't kind of get any of those questions. So in order to just move us along, what I do want to switch us over to, right, is so we're thinking through policing, detention, kind of deportation, and that part of laws and policies, right? But Ubaldo, some of the work, not Ubaldo, actually Javier, I'm looking at Javier. Javier, some of the work that you all do is also kind of looking at a series of integrationist policies, right? How we actually target the local level and the state level, right? City councils, cities, regions, kind of the state, to actually implement laws and policies that are beneficial, right? That are helpful kind of to folks kind of who are here. So tell us a little bit kind of about that kind of work and what that entails, or what you all are kind of looking at in that regard.
Yeah, so some of the work that we've done in the, and I think when we think back one of the biggest ones, I think, would have to be driver's licenses for folks, right? Something that most people take for granted, right? Like just being able to drive is such a privilege. for well, it's such a privilege to be able to drive with the license, and for many years Californians were not able to do that, right? And because you weren't able to drive with the license, you would get pulled over. It meant hundreds of dollars in legal fees, right? You had to pay for not having a license, not having insurance under the car name, and then also to try to get your car back from the impound. It's hundreds, if not sometimes it could go up to a few $1,000s, right? A couple $1,000s for some folks. And so having maybe 60 driver's licenses, that was such a big victory for our communities, because then folks felt well, they were able to drive, they were able to take their kids to school, and also able to to go to work, right? And not necessarily be scared of being pulled over and not being able to being pulled over and then having their car taken away. So that was a big victory. I think we celebrated, I think there's over 1 million Californians that didn't qualify previously that now do, that have their licenses. So that's that's a big thing to celebrate. But also part of that, some other policies that that we have been also fighting for are like the street vendor bill, right? It's the food sidewalk vendor bill. It was a very interesting bill. It legalized sidewalk vending, but it also had it also gave the cities parameters so that they can actually decide, well, how they would implement that. And so when you have a city that's not as friendly to immigrants, let's say a city that's that's not LA or San Francisco, then we have to then definitely work with community to ensure that what the cities are trying to enforce, it's actually something that's accessible to our communities, right? So we're very early in the pandemic, in about March, April, the cities like Riverside and cities like San Bernardino were ready to criminalize street vending and ready to enforce ticketing food vendors. And it's also at the very beginning of the pandemic where millions of people lost their jobs, and it was like, this is normal, right? People want to work and people will turn to food because that's something that's number one, it's food, and people want to try different food. It's also culture, right? It's culture to make food and also sell food. And so we went to the cities, and these are the largest cities in the counties, and we said, well, pretty much we forced them to stop any enforcement of any policies that were going to be detrimental to immigrant communities. And we also had to show them how these enforcement of these policies could also end up in deportation, right? If someone cannot pay their $75 ticket, that ticket then it continues to accrue. We had one family, mujer, who came to us with it was a $25 ticket. By the time she came to us, and because of how everything was closed, her ticket had gone from $25 to about $3,000. And we were like, okay, and it was like a mistake of, it was like, well, the city was closed, but y'all were still increasing your fines, even though she couldn't pay it. But they didn't think anyone would be there, with her. And also they didn't think that she would advocate for herself and fight it. So we were able to fight that, and she was able to bring down her ticket to $25, right? But again, these are the things where some people don't understand, like, when you have a policy that can lead to high fines, then folks can then end up in deportation somehow, right? If you are coming out and enforcing a health policy with the police department, that also is like, it's scary, and that should not be, that should not be happening, right? Code enforcement should be able to talk to people and say, here's this, you need to change this or that, without having to bring a police officer with a gun, with them to talk to someone that's selling food in the corner, right? And so that was another moment of education, and also, where where our folks share their stories and we're able to stop, that criminalization of street vendors. And then, one of the biggest fights that we have right now as we think about, dignity for communities, is also just healthcare, right? During this pandemic, we saw that undocumented individuals, a study from UC Merced found that undocumented communities, undocumented individuals were more likely to get to contract COVID, and also more likely to die. And there were from COVID, and some of those what they found was that it was, not having access to a regular doctor, not having access to any doctor, being scared of going to the hospital, in fear of being, of having to pay thousands of dollars, or fear of, being part of the system, right? And so there's this fight at the local level to fight for healthcare for undocumented communities and families, but also at the statewide level, right? The state can be doing a lot more for communities. And so, our fight is local, but also we take it to the state level when we can. And so there's different strategies on how we can get, healthcare for undocumented families. And so we're fighting at the local level and also at the state level for communities. Those are just, three things that I can think of on how, the work that we're doing, so that folks, for us, it's just like, how can undocumented people be protected? How can they be respected? How, live a life with dignity and not have to be, we're not asking for more, we're not asking for less. We're asking for exactly the same thing as everyone else that lives and works in the state of California.
Ubaldo, you wanted to get in?
Yeah, I just wanted to mention that right now there's SB 464, which was introduced by State Senator Hurtada, which is a bill for anybody in California, undocumented or not, is eligible to get food stamps, CalFresh, and these are the things that happen that really affect our brothers and sisters in the immigrant community. Like these are so important. And Rainbow Beginnings, the organization that we've started, has signed on to this as a campaign that we're advocating for. And that just means that everything that we do will sort of have, a little tag to say, support this, please pass this. Because it's really important, we could definitely use that in the house, but for just to feed these guys. Let me tell you, like I bought like 6 bunches of bananas on Saturday and they're gone. So these things really, really matter. And especially during COVID, when people are not able to work and we're witnessing immigrant communities not able to access any services or any support, it's very frustrating. So I applaud. Thank you, Javier. And I really hope everybody takes a look at this bill and supports it. So.
Great, thanks. So let me ask you all, we're kind of coming around to kind of closing off our time. Just about, in the kind of your trajectories kind of working in these areas, just some of the lessons that you've learned that you kind of maybe want to share with us. And then also some final points for the ways that like folks might want to get involved. One of the questions that we have are like, what are the corporations that are that we should be not supporting, right? And I think right now, one of the things that we're seeing is folks kind of who are really trying to be much more intentional about the ways that they're spending their money, for example, right? Who to support and who not to support in terms of what they're buying. So if anybody also kind of has anything on that side, we can kind of roll that question in. Does anyone want to start lessons learned and ways that folks can kind of get involved?
Yeah, so the corporations, these for-profit corporations, there's 2 major ones. One is GEO and one is CoreCivic. So they only exist for the purpose of incarcerating and detaining people, including immigrants. And actually, detaining immigrants is their most profitable, part of their business, right? The detention of immigrants in horrible conditions. Just last year under COVID, in Adelanto, we broke a couple stories. One of them was the fact that, there was no social distancing. There was 1,400 individuals in there. And then, Gio was saying, well, they're detained. How are they going to get sick? And we're like, yeah, your staff is going out. They're not detained. Your staff is going out. And so that was, they just would really just not take concerns serious, right? And so that's why a judge actually ordered so that the numbers would go down, and there was releases of folks from Adelanto Detention Center. The other, one of the other things that we uncovered instead of GEO and adelanto was that they were using a chemical called HQD chemical, and it's a toxic chemical. They denied it. They're like, we don't use it. When it was, when they couldn't deny it anymore, they said, well, we're using it correctly. And actually turns out that they weren't. And the Environment Protection Agency just actually released a report saying that GEO broke the law by broke environmental laws and by using that chemical instead of adelanto, and actually spraying not just tables, but they were actually spraying people with this chemical. So yeah, these sewer operations are horrible. They have no regard for humanity, and so dignity. So those are the two, GEO and Core Civic. To get involved, I think, for ICIJ, folks can email info@ic4ij.org, and some, just, say that you're interested in being part of the work or getting to know more of the work. So just info@ic4ij.org. You can also check out our website. It's under construction, so I'm not sure if it's up right now, but www.ic4ij.org, and you can find more ways to be involved there. And I think just the last thing to say on my end is, what I've learned throughout the work of, working with immigrant rights is, I think the biggest thing is number one, centering those that are directly impacted in the work, centering their needs, and also centering their stories, and also centering them, right? Like who they are, and empowering those that are directly impacted to be their own advocates, and to advocate for themselves, their friends, their families, their communities, their neighbors. That's one thing that I've learned throughout, my work in immigrant rights.
Just for those who are asking, we will get all of these websites kind of in links and add them once we put this stream up on the DesertX website. So if you didn't catch that, we'll be sure to make sure you have a way to get that. Ubaldo.
Yeah, speaking of highlighting folks, I wanted to introduce you to some people that are staying with us. This is Caesar.
Hi, my name is Cesar. I am from Honduras.
Yes, this is Cassie.
Hi, my name is Frank Cassie from Ghana.
And this is Paulo.
Hi, I am Paul. I am from Mexico.
And then there's Peter.
I'm Peter. My name, I'm from Russia.
And then
Ronnie, I'm from Cuba. Hi.
So these are the guys that are staying with us in the area. And I agree, Javier, like we definitely have to uplift their voices and their needs. And this is what we're doing all the time, constantly asking, like, what do you need? What do you need? Some of the things that we see as headaches are, people don't know how to advocate for themselves a lot of the time. And especially in this new bureaucratic system that they've entered that requires you, to have ID and be able to prove who you are. And also just requires a lot of English, and English is detrimental to any immigrant, to be honest with you, because it really forces you to be basically illiterate, and it's really confusing and hard. So other than that, I would just, if anybody wants to get involved with Rainbow Beginnings, I will, please, we have volunteers. We have people come speak English. If anybody wants a buddy system, we do that as well, just so people get to know people in the community and access friends and a support network. So, and I'll put all that in the chat for you. So thank you so much for having me.
Lizbeth. Lizbeth.
Yeah. So hearing both Javier and Ubaldo speak and highlight the fact that yes, we do have to center the stories of undocumented people. I myself am undocumented, but I think one of the things that I've learned as an attorney is that I am a very privileged person, despite the fact that I am maybe in the same or sometimes even worse position than some of my clients, but I have a law degree. I have access to places and things that my clients don't. I can walk into a detention center and walk out of it without any issue because I have a bar card, because I'm an attorney. So for me, it's been the biggest lesson I think I've learned as an attorney / organizer / undocumented person is that I have to check my own privilege many times and understand that, I have a duty to make sure that my clients are safe. I have a duty to make sure that, you know, we can be in the best position possible so my clients can win their cases. But at the end of the day, my clients, I think, are not just survivors. They're, you know, they're people who have thrived in many ways to some extent. And then the asylum seekers, I mean, they're survivors. They're very courageous, and I think they do know how to advocate for themselves to some extent. But I know that the system makes them feel very vulnerable. It makes them feel like they don't have certain rights. They don't have you know, the ability to access certain things. But they have traveled, some of them, through several borders. They have gone through hell and back to get to this point where we are. And so for me, it's making sure that I highlight their stories, that I empower them enough to see me as an equal and to see me as a partner, because I cannot win their cases unless they help me. You know, I don't do magic. And I always tell my clients, if we're going to win this case, if we're going to be in a better position to win your case, I need you to help me. I need you to be my partner. I need you to trust me. Let's trust each other. Let's work together. But I need you to also, you know, be resilient and advocate for yourself. And I'm going to be there every step of the way. So that's, you know, that's the work that I do. And I'm not sure that I've been very successful at doing all the things that I want to do, but I'm always, you know, trying to push for that.
Thank you all. And so a final question, and we asked this at the last event as well, is, you know, you are all kind of doing this really wonderful work and also really heavy work, right? But we're also kind of thinking through kind of joy and happiness and, right, the things that are bringing us kind of joy and happiness these days. And so if there's anything that you all are listening to, reading, watching, that's just kind of bringing you joy amidst kind of everything that's happening, can you share that with us as well? Do we have any takers?
You know, I don't have a lot of time to watch TV or read other than legal cases, which is very sad, but I've been wanting to do more. So I have a list of things that I want to watch. So I just, the things that bring me joy are definitely my nephews. And so looking at their pictures, the videos that my brother sent, the, you know, things that he posts on social media about the babies. Oh, I think I froze. That's what brings me joy. In spending time with my parents and talking to them and hearing more about their, you know, their own journey, their own lives, their own stories. And then when I feel like watching something, but I don't have the time to pay attention to things, because I like to pay attention to what I'm watching, then I just watch reruns of Schitt's Creek.
Oh, great.
Yeah. So, yeah, I mean, I'm usually sitting in front of a computer like for most of the day as well. I think, you know, going from the, you know, being on the ground all the time to an executive director, it's very different work. You're sitting in front of a computer, you know, finding grants and, you know, doing all this work. So that's, you know, like I just have a playlist that I usually put. It has different Spanish music, Natalia, A Los Angeles Azules, Ana Gabriel, Juan Gabriel. So it's like just a different playlist that I put. But I also want to say, one of the things that also brings me joy, it's also seeing people like, you know, like Felipe, right, and thriving in you know, in their work, right, and artists, and how knowing and understanding, and that, you know, there's a role for everyone in this movement. And, you know, seeing Felipe really spreading awareness and spreading yeah, and, you know, just awareness on immigrants and immigrant issues through his art is something that's also amazing. And that also brings me joy, you know, seeing folks that, as Lizbeth said, like we were self-funded, like we were like raising money and asking our parents for money, right? When our parents didn't have a lot of money, but they would find a way to be like, okay, well, here's $100 or here's something, right? So I think that's just, you know, just seeing the fact that, you know, that folks are thriving in their work. It's also something that brings me joy right now, right? It's important to find joy in the work that we do, and I'm finding that, you know, every day, you know, especially part of these conversations, right, with folks like Lizbeth, folks like Ubaldo, that, you know, that do this work, and we do it because it's important work, and also we do it because it's you know, it's a labor that of love, right? And that, you know, we know that we have to do this, and also because, hey, we got to do it because we're directly impacted sometimes as well. So yeah, those are the things that bring me joy right now.
Okay, thanks. Ubaldo, do you have anything to add?
Yeah, so one of the things that brings me a lot of joy right now is working with this group that I started here for queer POCs called Tokens, where we just get to like meet and kiki on Zoom for 2 hours most of the time and just, you know, talk about ridiculousness and have a good time. We started reading Adrienne Marie Brown's Emergent Strategy as a group. So that's really, I don't know if anybody's read that, but it's a great book. And, you know, just sort of dissecting it with each other and kind of picking ideas. But the best thing where this like recently finished was La Veneno on HBO. My God, it was amazing and it brought me a lot of joy. So yeah, that's what I've been doing.
Yeah, I'll add, I just started watching it and I'm watching it kind of with family. So it's such a great series. Everyone should watch it. And I'll also echo Javier and say I am just thrilled that Felipe is a part of Desert X this year, along with all of the other, I think, wonderful work that he's doing. I want to just kind of end by kind of linking the last conversation that we had with Felipe and Cesar and also kind of this conversation. So in the last conversation, we raised a dual perspective of fugitive bodies, right? We kind of came up with this idea that bodies are made fugitive through laws and policies and everyday practices, but that they're also fugitive because they turn away from laws that are unjust, they resist, and they build lives in search of freedoms. And I think this is part of what we see with the virtual gathering today and in a lot of the work that you all are doing, right? Identifying kind of that fugitivity. In the film, The Undocumented Lawyer, Edith Espinal echoes one part of this. And this is not a direct quote, this is just the spirit of it. But Edith says, when laws are unjust, a friend told her, we must fight them. We cannot stay silent. And so I think today we should leave applauding the work, of course, of Ubaldo, Javier, and Lizbeth, but also I think asking ourselves, what is our complicity and responsibility in affecting change and in creating a more just and equitable society? And I want to thank you all really for the work that you're doing and for the different points that you've kind of given us to consider, but also the ways in which we can kind of get involved as well. So thank you. And if you haven't seen it yet, check out any of the Desert X programming. And we'll see everyone later. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
Thank you. Bye, everyone.